This video is a bit of a deep dive with a stamp set, and it's also about the power of play, of going old school without the usual tools, and that sometimes it's okay to ditch lines and just straight out copy. I know, right? Recently, one of the quilting accounts I followed published a new quilting pattern that just makes me happy, and this week I stamped my own little quilt. Let me show you. I have this old Geo flower building stamp set from Simon Says Stamp that has a bunch of solid shapes, including this 4-petal squarish flower kind of thing. And I went old school. No stamp positioner, just an acrylic block. And size matters, especially if you want some precision in your stamping. I like to have a block that's just a bit bigger than the stamp, so I can see clearly through the block and see the spacing around the stamp. If the edges of the block are too close to the stamp, sometimes it makes it difficult to see where you're stamping. I also like it to be lined up fairly straight on the block because I think our eyes will sometimes try to use the edges of the block for lining up the image instead of the image itself. I've got 4 colors here, and I'm pretty much using the same colors that were used in the quilt. I've got Catching Rays, Do-Si-Do, Pucker Up, and Samba. I started at the top and the center with the Catching Rays, and then I moved to the left with the Do-Si-Do. I've studied the quilt enough to know how to offset these flowers so that the straight parts of the petals meet up and kind of end where the curve starts. I did the Samba on the other side, and now I've got 2 flowers in Pucker Up that need to go on the same line as the Catching Rays flower that I started with. One thing about stamping off the edge here is that the ink remains very wet, and it's very easy to pick up on the side of your hands and then smudge it down as you're trying to get stability to place the stamp again. So just be careful about that. Then I just built the pattern from here. So let's talk about some of my choices. This isn't the first time I've made this pattern. I have tried it with my MISTI. The nice thing about using the MISTI is that if you ever have any less than perfect stamping, you can restamp. You can also use the grid on the door of the MISTI to help with making sure everything's straight and lined up. For me, the problem was how much time it took stamping, then cleaning the stamp, then repositioning the stamp, and then stamping it again. But it's definitely effective if you have the patience. The other thing was that I couldn't fit a 6x6 inch piece of cardstock into my original MISTI and have room to do that off-edge stamping. So then I thought I'll just use an acrylic block and I'll stamp on the grip mat that's in my MISTI. This meant I would have a harder time restamping if I needed to, and I needed to, because often I wasn't getting a good impression. The grip mat on the MISTI surface was super hard, you know what I mean? It's much easier to transfer ink if there's a little bit of give in your stamping surface. And then finally I thought of this Altenew grip mat. It has that kind of bumpy side on the back that feels like it just might have a little more bounce in it. It also meant I wasn't trying to work around the edges of the MISTI in the door, just a more open working area. And I could fit a 6x6 inch panel on it. That'll give me enough to make a few cards. As I stamped, I just tried to keep an eye on where each petal was lining up, not only with the one that was diagonally next to it with the petals like I was saying earlier, but also checking my rows and my columns. If you're not using the MISTI, make sure your ink pads are freshly refilled. I did have one yellow flower where a part of the petals didn't stamp, and I tried to line it up to restamp. I missed it ever so slightly, and the same area didn't stamp, so I lost both ways on that one. Before I moved on, I grabbed a cloth and I wiped off some of the ink that was sitting on the edges of the grip mat. And then I grabbed the largest dot stamp from the set to create the flower centers. I also chose a smaller acrylic block. Again, I want it big enough so I can see where I'm stamping, but if it's too big, it's really easy to dip the edges of it into the ink, and that can just cause other problems. I wanted colors in the same range, but I also wanted each flower's center to be darker than its petals. So for the yellow flowers, I used the pink Pucker Up ink. For the Pucker Up flowers, I used the Samba ink. Then for the other 2, I added in some darker shades. I used Tiki Torch for the Do-Si-Do flower centers and Flirty Fuchsia for the Samba flowers. I chose the biggest dot, but you could change the look by using smaller dots as well. This stamping went much faster because I could do all of one color at once. Then I moved on to the leaves. The quilt uses circles that kind of fit into the petals, and I don't have that exact shape. So I used what I had, and first I started with this larger kind of squarish petal shape and Lime Ricky ink. Again, this stamping goes very quickly because it's all one color. And then to bring in the darker green from the quilt, and also just to fill in a bit more of the white space, I grabbed a smaller dot and a smaller block again, and grass skirt, and I stamped little circles on each side of each leaf. I confused myself a little bit when I turned my turntable, which was just kind of an instinct, but I started wondering if I really was putting them in the right place. I figured it all out. There really wasn't anywhere else to put them, but at this point of the process, I really didn't want to be getting anything in the wrong place. And there it is, my little version of the quilt. It's such a fun, happy pattern, and I decided to see how it would look with some different colors and other small changes. First, I made 4 cards with the original panel. I started with a Z-fold design and added an Avery L birthday sentiment with some homemade gold embellishments. This one has a small Mama Elephant thank you sentiment popped up in one of the flowers. Next was a 2-for-1 from a panel that was 4 by 5¼ inches that I cut in half to give some white space on each card. I used an ink blot shop thinking of you sentiment on one, and then that same happy birthday on the other. Here's my first color experiment. I used grays this time to make the flowers and the leaves, and I used the leaf differently in between the flowers. I added dragon fruit flower centers and some sauna dots and finished with a Simon Says Stamp die-cut birthday sentiment. Next, I got all frosty with some blues and indigos. I stamped lots of extra dots in amongst the petals and leaves and centers, and I trimmed the panel with a circle die, and I cut out a strip from the center for a recessed birthday sentiment from Simon Says Stamp. And of course, I had to try Christmas as well. This one's another 2-for-1, and you can see I used a small dot for the flower centers and to fill in the white space I made by shifting the leaves to right up next to the flowers. The Merry Christmas die cut is from Paper Rose, and the Joy is from Waffle Flower. Where do you like to look for inspiration? I love geometric patterns, so quilting and Lego mosaics are really right up my alley. But I'm always on the lookout for more, and I'd love to hear from you. Did you have a favorite from today? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.